Gerard, has the ABC crossed the line?
Well, it continually crosses the line. If you're a public broadcaster and you're paid for by the taxpayer, and by law you are supposed to be politically balanced, when you are not, you are crossing the line, and that just continues. I think last night was probably the worst example in some time, because what you had, as you pointed out in your introduction, you had a panel which was a conservative-free zone, including the presenter. I mean, there wasn't a conservative in sight. Now, what this program was discussing was a range of social issues. So the idea that you can't find 1, 2 or 3 conservative women in this country is just an insult to the country and to those women. You can find them if you want to find them, if you're looking for them. Now, this was done in cooperation with the left-wing Wheeler Centre in Melbourne. So the Wheeler Centre, a left-wing organisation, puts forward this group for their forthcoming conference. They go on the ABC. Everyone agrees with everyone else, and it just goes a bit further than usual, because it's not usual on the ABC that people are calling on other people to commit arson. I mean, imagine what would happen if you or I on this program said that people who didn't like the ABC should go down to Waltermo or South Bank and burn it down. We would be arrested, actually, I would think. So it's across the line, but it's always crossing the line. The reason why it always crosses the line is that nobody runs it. The managing director doesn't run it. The board can't run it. The chair of the board can't run it. The managing director can run it. And so it's run by various Soviets. And so whilst you've highlighted Fran Kelly, the actual decision to put this program on would have been made by the executive director, not by Fran Kelly. She's the presenter. So it's not simply a problem of the presenter, it's the problem of the whole organisation. And in the ABC, it's the presenters, as I understand it, who decide the panels. It's the producers who decide the panels, not the presenters.
And yet, I agree with you. It's an institutional thing, really. It is an institutional thing. So I showed that clip from an earlier show, Get Crackin' as well, which, again, you know, the advocacy of violence, the outward racism, anti-white racism, etc. I mean, you say that, you know, the ABC is beyond the control of the boss. If that's the case, why have those bosses? What is the Morrison government doing to hold the management to account for the $1 billion a year that they're supposed to be supervising, and for the lack of political balance and the advocacy of outright violence on our ABC? I mean, surely some heads must roll.
Well, all the Morrison government does, or any government does, is appoint the board and the chair of the board. And the board and the chair appoint the managing director, who also sits on the board. So the only person there with any authority on the board to do anything is the managing director. And I thought initially that David Anderson might be an improvement. I'm not sure at the moment that he's not an improvement on his predecessor, but that doesn't mean much. I mean, if you're not running, if you're taking $1 million and you're not actually running the place, and no one makes any comments on that kind of program, I mean, that program is 24 hours old at the moment. I'm not aware that anyone at the ABC has made any comment about it. It's sort of...
But that's the thing they don't, Gerard. That's the thing. This is one of the things that make the ABC so oppressive. It's gargantuanly huge, right?
Yes.
It's got, what is it, 4 national TV stations, 5 national radio stations, and a groupthink where no presenter dares, barely any presenter dares criticise anyone else. So when it's spoken on an issue, it has spoken. There's no dissent. It's run almost like a Stalinist collective. And I think now it is an absolute blot on our culture. And why the ABC is not brought under control by a Liberal government, God knows what would do under a Labor one.
Well, the other point I think is important to make is, and I pointed out on my media watchdog last Friday, that if you do complain, and I recommend that people don't complain because it's just a waste of time, but if you do complain to the ABC, management flicks it down to ABC bureaucrats in Canberra, who, of the complaints they consider, reject 97%. That's the latest figure. So there's no point. Really, because what it does is it validates the bad behaviour, because then the presenters and the producers will say, oh, we did all right because we were cleared by Audience and Consumer Affairs in Canberra, so we're all right. So it's just in a terrible bind, and I'm not sure what Paul Fletcher, the new minister, will say about this. Other ministers like Richard Olsen tried very hard.
Gerard. At least they could say something. This is the other thing, you know. Talk is absolutely cheap. Won't cost him to open his mouth and damn well say something. I mean, look, just to get this idea of the bias on the ABC and the bile, and it makes me throw up every time I hear the managing director or the chairman say, oh, we're not biased. Of course they're biased. Look at what I'm just showing you. There was also this from last night's show. Abolish the police, which is exactly what the Marxists who organised last week's political violence in Melbourne also want. Have a listen.
The police started, like its very formation was to serve the interests of white sovereignty in this country. So I don't know if we're talking about accountability, I don't know how far we can go in keeping an organisation like the police to account, because it is there to be violent, it is patriarchal, and it is overwhelmingly white. So why, how do we... I think it shouldn't exist, but I think, yeah.
But how do we do it? Let's talk about that. And I want to get rid of incarceration, and I'm with you on the police.
Gerard, I should actually point out to that speaker that she's got white ancestors herself, so if white's inherently racist, she might have a look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Gerard, but no police. They're just violent, they're white, they're male, don't have jail either. No one contradicted them. There was no discussion of that, no debate. Fran Kelly's nodding like one of those puppet dogs on the back of the you see in some cars still. I mean, you know, what is going on here?
Well, I can see your point. I mean, if you want to go down and burn something down, you don't want any police because they might stop you. So, I mean, your point is somewhat logical.
All right, you got me.
But the point here is, I mean, that is just the anarchist position. And as we know, there's never really been an anarchist society. I mean, anarchist societies invariably become dictatorships because someone else takes over. So what she's saying is essentially we shouldn't have a police force. So if someone's if someone's trying to murder someone tonight, I mean, the logic from that show, which no one contradicted last night, was we shouldn't have police, so we can all go out tonight and just have mayhem because there won't be a police force. And they're white. Even if you have white ancestors yourself, you dismiss all them and say somehow perhaps they're okay, but everyone else isn't. But again, look, it wouldn't have mattered last night. I didn't have a problem really with anything was said if there was someone else on the platform, on the panel, to contradict it. If there was some debate, I don't care what anyone says, provided they don't threaten to commit a crime or kill someone. I don't care. But there should be someone with the intellectual capability and the intellectual courage to take it on. And last night there was nobody there. That's partly because of... I agree with you
completely. All right, you can invite the odd moron on, you know, just to stir the pot.
Yes.
But not only morons. There've got to be some people who are a little bit wise. And I find this ironic. It's just a month ago the ABC was saying, oh, we've got to connect more with the Australian public and let's go out to suburbia and find out, you know, take the pulse of people in the suburbs. I tell you what, that show was not speaking for suburban Australia. Now, listen, Gerard, talking about activists and violence, I noted that Sydney Morning Herald columnist Peter Fitzsimons, man of the left, for some reason, unknown to me, asked to give the Andrew Ollie lecture on journalism, of which he's got only a nodding acquaintance, where he talked about his friend Michael Carlton, another leftist, throwing a glass of wine over Conservative writer Piers Ackerman at an earlier Andrew Ollie lecture. Here's Fitzsimons.
And 20 years ago, a couple of hours after Lachlan Murdoch had given his Ollie lecture and the crowd was dispersing, I was still there in the bowels of the Western Hotel, early hours of the morning, as Mike Carlton was shaping to throw a glass of wine over Piers Ackerman. I was trying to stop the unfolding catastrophe. Mike, no! And only narrowly failing. Missed it by that much. They were great days and wonderful nights.
Yeah, great days, wonderful times that a journalist of the left assaulted another, a Conservative. The leftists in the room applause. There's Carlton grinning and smirking. Your reaction?
Well, it was assault. He was assault. He threw wine over a fellow journalist. But my reaction is this is one of double standards. Now, when Alan Joyce, the head of Qantas, when he was advocating same-sex marriage, someone assaulted him by putting a pie in his face, I think in Perth, and that was assault. And people rightly said that was assault. So if you put a pie in Alan Joyce's face, that's assault. Yes. But if you pour a glass of wine over Piers Ackerman, it's a wonderful time and everybody laughs and cheers in the ABC audience. Which
it's only conservative, you see, Gerard. It was only conservative.
Oh, I
got
see.
Assaulted. So that's the difference that you don't pick up. Honestly, that shamed the cream of Australian journalism there. No wonder I hate those nights. I hate award nights. I'm ashamed that someone stuck me up for an award against my will in the next one. I hate them. I won't go to them. I just loathe the journalistic community when I see that sort of thing. Hey, listen, as it happens though, Gerard, I was there when Carlton flung his wine over Ackerman. I was there. And Fitzsimon's account, absolute baloney. Carlton, who seemed to be very unsteady on his feet, but this will shock you, of course, when he threw his wine over. His aim was so wild and unsteady that he splashed a whole lot of people, including the then chairman of the ABC. I confronted Carlton, told him to move to the other side of the room, and he, backed off and did that. It was only at that moment that Fitzsimons turns up. He addresses not Carlton, he addresses me, because he's upset that I'd sent away his mate. I saw not the slightest evidence that Fitzsimons tried to stop Carlton from throwing his wine. All I saw was Fitzsimons angry with me for reprimanding Carlton for having done so. Now, so in other words, whatever Fitzsimons says, the truth is almost the exact opposite. You're surprised. I see you astonished with your shocked face.
Yes, absolutely shocked. I mean, there's a lot of fiction in Peter Fitzsimon's non-fiction, and you saw it last night. It was sort of on Friday night, it was every fashionable left-wing cause he advocated and got cheered, and it all ended, of course, with a standing ovation. I mean, what would you expect? But no, I'm not surprised with that. I mean, the history is often rewritten in these matters, but, I mean, the fact is assault is assault. And that wasn't acknowledged on the night by the Speaker, and no one in the audience appeared to object, and most people in the audience appeared to applaud. So
that is Australian journalism for you, folks. That is what it is. That lecturing bunch of people, that's what they're really like.